a lot of people get this question wrong, and to me it's surprising because it's only a hard question. The words and the choices are hard, but the trap is kind of obvious, or at least it should be clear as we're reading this that something weird is happening, right? So let me just go through it fast first, and I'll show you where I noticed the weird thing. Some foraging models predict that the distance bees travel when foraging will decline as floral density increases. But biologists Shailene Jha and Claire Kremen showed that bees' behavior is inconsistent with this prediction if flowers in dense patches are blank. Bees will forage beyond patches of low species richness to acquire multiple resource types. So they're telling us something, and then there's a contrast with that. So I know that like whatever I thought first has now just completely changed in some way. I don't think the way is obvious, but now I'm like, all right, there's something weird happening here. I've got to roll up my sleeves and do the hard work of figuring out the logic of this passage. That usually means I'm writing on my scratch paper. So at the top here, we can kind of represent what they're saying. Some foraging models predict that the distance bees travel when foraging will decline as floral density increases. So increased density means a decrease in distance, right? That's basically what they're saying. Right? The distances bees travel will decline as density increases. So there you go. But something weird is happening, something inconsistent, meaning down here in some way, we're saying that as something about the change in the density, right? So maybe we're saying that as density decreases, we have a decrease in distance. There's some flipping. Or is maybe the other way around, if you increase the density, you're going to increase the distance? Like, I don't know, but it's definitely not going to say the same thing. So this prediction of flowers in dense patches are what, right? So to me, they're still saying, though, that the flowers are dense. So that part, I don't know, doesn't maybe seem to matter, right? They're still dense. There's something else about them. What do they say? Well, the colon in any vocab question is a dead giveaway that they're about to repeat themselves. So I better pay attention. Hopefully, they're going to give me something important. Bees will forage beyond patches of low species richness. Right now, that is not the same thing as density. That's a new piece of information, right? To acquire multiple resource types. So they're still dense, but now the bees are going to go farther. Even though these are dense flower patches, they're going to go farther because they want different resource types. So I'm trying to fill in this blank here. This prediction, they showed that bees' behavior is inconsistent with this prediction if flowers in dense patches are not species rich, right? Low species richness, right? That's kind of what they're saying. I'm mostly copying what they're saying there. So I still don't quite understand what's happening, but let's go to the choices and maybe something will jump out. Depleted means kind of like empty. So maybe, right? Maybe they're empty of different species. That could work. Let's keep it. Homogeneous or homogeneous, depending on how you want to pronounce it, means kind of same. Right? Same throughout. Meaning that, again, if it's all one type of flower species, then maybe it has low species richness. It's homogeneous. It's the same kind of flower. So there's not multiple resource types in that patch. This also seems like it could relate to the different types of things in the patch, right? Not the density, the different types of things in the patch. Immature, well, that just means it's not mature. It's not old enough. But we're not really talking about the age of the flowers, so this just seems random. Dispersed, I feel like, is what most people pick. That's the trap, because dispersed means spread out. So in a very surface level way, this is the only choice that has anything to do with density. But we're still saying that they're dense patches. How could a dense patch be spread out? It's not dense anymore if it's dispersed. It is now not dense, right? These are opposite ideas. So even just putting that word in the blank and just looking at the few words around it, it doesn't make any sense. The dense patches are dispersed. Then we would expect, right, the thing to happen that it says after the colon, right? If they were dispersed, if they were spread out, then it would be expected that they would go for a higher distance, right? That's just another version of this top dumb summary, right? If there's low density, then we would expect high distance. So if the dense patches were dispersed, not dense, then the bees would forage beyond those patches. That is exactly what they originally predicted. But now these two people are saying that that's not actually what happens. So this is a big trap here in D, mostly because it does something that we want to do in lots of other cases on these vocab questions. It copies a word that we see somewhere else. We can steal the word density, flip it around, and suddenly we're like, well, it's the same idea. But the passage is more complicated than that. And like I said, I would hope that as you're reading it, you're sensing trouble as you get to words like but and inconsistent. Something's broken about that relationship. So we have to be able to evaluate it. Now, the actual answer when we finally end this thing is B, mostly because that's just a little bit closer to both of the aspects of the part after the colon, right? Where low species richness, that is basically just saying there's a lot of flowers, but they're all of the same type. They're the same species. So they have to go further away to acquire multiple resource types, multiple types of flowers. So homogeneous has to do with that. It's still dense. It's still a dense patch. It's just dense with all daffodils, all tulips, something like that. Whereas if the patch were depleted, now what? Does it just not have any flowers because it's depleted of them? If that were the case, then it's not a dense flower patch anymore. It's nothing. It's like an empty field, right? So that doesn't really make sense. And then what else would they be depleted with? Like maybe if they specified, that would make more sense. Are they depleted of like nectar? But like that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about the number of types of species, not like how much nectar they provide. So this is just A is just getting into things that I just don't understand. It's really just the case that I could make A fit by forcing more assumptions into this story. Or B just kind of fits using the words that are there. And as always with the SAT, whether it's a vocab question or a passage question, the less work you have to do, the better. But we still needed to do quite a bit of work to get to this point. Hopefully you knew the words. If you didn't, then yeah, you're screwed kind of no matter what happens. But if we do know the words, and most people who I work with who get this question wrong know the definitions of these words, but they pick D because they're just not understanding that a lot of these hard vocab questions are not just about definitions. They're about the logic, the relationships, the kinds of things we also need to think about on the passage questions. So dumb summaries, drawing out these arrows and kind of making a little bit of a mathematical dumb summary, that stuff can be helpful, but also noticing the right strong words like but and inconsistent that show us when something we just said isn't going to hold up for the rest of the passage. So a lot of great strategies in here. Please comment if anything else kind of jumped out to you that made you get this one right, or if you fell for the trap. I am curious as well, but hopefully you won't next time.